which you can find at
www.worldpoliticsreview.com.
Okay. Emma Kate Simons, correspondent for Australia's The Financial Review. How are you?
Very well. How are you?
And Franco-Syrian photojournalist Amr Abed Rabo. Welcome back, sir. The World This Week, where you can always weigh in on the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag TWTW. Now, over nearly 2 years, it's been nearly 2 years, revolution in the Arab world's most populous nation has sometimes been exhilarating and empowering. It's also, though, been punctuated by spurts of frenzied and alarming crises. This is one of those times. Deadly clashes this week in Cairo after the president decreed himself sweeping judicial powers and put the new constitution on the fast track to a December 15th referendum. A constitution drafted by an Islamist-dominated assembly. When the violence turns deadly, tanks deployed outside the presidential palace on Thursday. The military weighing in for the first time in a showdown that's lasted 2 weeks, weighing in on the side of Mohamed Morsi. Judah Grunstein, though, when you look at the situation right now in Cairo as it heads towards that referendum, neither side is blinking.
No, neither side is blinking, and I think in some ways this is both what everyone feared, but also in some ways what everyone knew was necessary, in the sense that everyone feared a power grab by the Muslim Brotherhood. And the question really was, would there be a counterpower? Would there be a counterbalancing power? Would the groups that were behind the initial uprising against Mubarak be able to re-energize themselves to sort of push back against what everyone was expecting from the Muslim Brotherhood? So, as much as the violence is alarming and tragic, I think it's almost a sign that Egypt will be moving towards, or hopefully will be moving towards, an accommodation of power that where the Brotherhood won't be successful in grabbing all the power.
Okay, so
whether they'll be able to do that democratically, that's the question now.
Okay, so listening to you, you get the sense there's still a bit of a power vacuum in Egypt. Do you agree with that, Amr Abed Rabo?
I think it's the main problem here is that maybe we've all been mistaken. I mean, I'm the first one who may use the word Arab Spring, and Arab Spring seems like something nice with birds and flowers, etc. And it's not an Arab Spring; it's a revolution. So a revolution is something painful. It's something with blood. It's something that takes a lot of time. I mean, when you look at Russian Revolution, French Revolution, it's not something that happens in one day and it's smooth and nice, etc. So this is a perfect illustration. I agree with Judah. I mean, I think the people who sent back Mubarak who sent him to jail, will not just let any other guy become a dictator that easily. We see it today. It will probably be the same in the next weeks or months. When you talk with a lot of the people in the street or on Facebook, or with people who are activists, let's say, they have no problem with the Brotherhood, let's say, with the Muslim Brotherhood, if they are a bit like Turkey, in a democracy, with counterpower, with freedom of press, with freedom of religion, etc. Now, if they want to be another Mubarak or another dictator or a very strong power, nobody wants them, I think.
Just to follow up, I sort of lost my train of thought because I was trying to avoid using the word encouraging and optimistic when there's so much violence. But in some ways, because nothing has been settled, because it's still a back and forth and a revolution, it's encouraging to see that the same forces that threw out Mubarak are not going to accept the same kind of tyranny from the Brotherhood. And when you said there's a power vacuum, what everyone was asking over the last couple of weeks was, where is the army? The army had disappeared after having been such a prominent force during the transition period. So the question really is, the army is going to be the arbiter. Where are they going to come down? And will it be on the side of democracy, or will it be on the side of some sort of pragmatic relationship with the Brotherhood to maintain power?
Craig Capillas, we spoke to one expert earlier who said, for now, the army's siding with Morsi, but that could change. It's always in a sort of a state of flux.
Well, it is with the army. You know, revolutions, be they Russian, French, or Iranian, are always hijacked. In Russia, you had the psychopath Stalin. In France, there was a fellow by the name of Robespierre. You could go down the list. This is normal. And I concur with Judah's assessment here. I mean, the magic phrase here is the military. What side will they go down on? What you're hearing on the streets is, you know, the radical Islamists are coming to get you. And you know what? These are not pleasant people. One gets the impression, even though we're not on the ground there, you get the impression that the majority of the Egyptian people do not want this medieval Sharia law running their lives.
Hang on a second. You say that.
That's the perception.
And even though there are hundreds of thousands of people who've protested, we're talking about a country of nearly 90 million.
Well, that's true. It's a country of 90 million, mostly poor people. So that's why I say the perception is, because as our colleague Vivian Walt, who's covered that area for years on the ground, has always said, what we see in Tahrir Square is really not an accurate reflection of what's going on in the country. So for me, if we were on the ground there right now, Tahrir Square is not the place to be. I think you need to go down the Nile or up the Nile and find out what's going on there, to find out if these people really want a medieval type of law ruling them. And if they do, well, that's a democracy, folks.
All right, the accusation is not necessarily that they're medieval. In fact, protesters have been brandishing images that show Hosni Mubarak and Morsi rolled into one. Emma Kate Simon.
Right, well, it's a dictator fatigue, I guess. But I do think, I do think you have a point about this sort of medieval Islamism, which, frankly, it's not really surprising that there's an attempt to go so far. The Muslim Brotherhood has never kind of hidden its radical agenda. And I think if you look
Hang on, but I thought it was the Salafists who are the radicals.
Well, even more so. Even when there's various.
Choice.
Well,
it depends where you're measuring.
There are
from.
steps.
Yeah, I mean,
What's fascinating to me is that what Morsi just did 3 weeks ago was almost the exact same thing that the military had done 6 or 9 months ago. I forget exactly when. And when you look at the constitution that they're trying to pass, it really continues to reserve all of the prerogatives of the military for the military.
He's cut a deal.
That's what people are worried about. The question is, obviously, the people in Tahrir Square are much more hostile to the military than apparently the Muslim Brotherhood is. I don't think, for instance, the military would get the same kind of treatment if the people who had taken over after the transition were really representative of what's going on in Tahrir Square.
When he spoke Friday evening, Morsi offered a sit-down with opposition leaders, which was rejected. He showed, though, little inclination to compromise, neither over his policies nor over the dozens arrested.
Some of the other people arrested are mercenaries. They carried out these violent acts for money. They confessed their crimes. They accused those who had paid them and given them weapons.
But there's also questions about the opposition. While it seems clear that it was Islamists who attacked that sit-in outside the presidential palace Wednesday, protesters have also been violent, ransacking Muslim Brotherhood offices in several cities, including Alexandria, Suez, and Cairo. The opposition, whose best-known faces abroad are former UN nuclear watchdog Mohammed el-Baradei and former Arab League boss Amr Moussa, part of a coalition called the National Salvation Front. What is, though, the true extent of their legitimacy? And it gets back to the question of, there are those inside Tahrir Square and those outside of it.
Their legitimacy, if they're united, is not the same if they're not united. You know, I mean, when there was the election a few months ago, probably a lot of Egyptians I know, and a lot of Egyptians who are, let's say, liberal or leftist or whatever, were wishing for some coalition like this one, you know, to have them all united and to have one candidate that is really able to face the Muslim Brotherhood candidate. They didn't do it then. They're doing it now. Maybe it's too late, but too little. I don't know. Let's see in the few next days. But for the moment, the crowd or the street seems with them. While a few months ago, Baradei, I remember, was rejected by the street. He was badly rejected during the election. I think.
Also,
Their fortunes ebbing and flowing. A final note on this. Questions about Morsi also coming from abroad. Washington Post cartoonist Tom Tolles has him saying, the only way to save democracy is to let me be an autocrat, with someone saying, oh, a riddle. So there you have that story.
Remember who shot the nose off the Sphinx, right? It was Napoleon's cannon.
In Syria, tangible signs that Bashar al-Assad is circling the wagons as fighting intensifies on the outskirts of the Syrian capital. The rebellion this Friday decreeing that Damascus's international airport is now a legitimate target, with vast swathes of the north effectively now under rebel control. The fighting, by the way, also spilling over to the Lebanese flashpoint city of Tripoli. That's just over the border. And Amr Abed Rabo, I know you've been in contact with people inside of Syria, and there really is this sense that the noose is tightening.
Yes, for a lot of people who it's been now 18 months, and maybe let's say 1 year that we say we're almost there, where it's getting close, where his hours are counted, things like that. So some people are really tired or don't believe it's where we are. But when you look at facts, I mean, I'm not talking about rumors. There are a lot of rumors that his mother left, that he might be leaving or seeking asylum, etc. But just look at facts. I mean, if the airport is closed or almost seized by the rebels, if the regime using Air Force more and more, I mean, it seems that it's the only way they can do something. On the ground, they can't do a lot. I've seen a lot of pictures of rebels with tanks. They seized in many of the bases. And it's getting so much close to Damascus. That's really the capital and where the regime is. So yes, now it's very difficult to say, is it a month, is it 2 months, is it 2 days? I mean, with these regimes, it's very difficult to say so.
The week began with the U.S. citing unnamed intelligence sources as saying the Assad regime, more and more desperate, was moving chemical weapons around, a prelude to NATO approving the deployment of Patriot missiles to the Turkish border. The chemical weapons claim sparking skepticism on the part of Moscow and denial on the part of Damascus.
If Syria had chemical weapons, they would definitely not be used against the Syrian people. We are genuinely concerned that there's a conspiracy by the US and some European states to use the weapons here. They might have supplied such weapons to the terrorist organizations in Syria in order to claim later that Syria is the one that used them.
You know, haunting all this discussion, Judah Bernstein, is those weapons of mass destruction back in 2003 that never materialized. And as a result, there are a lot of people who are skeptical over these claims.
Yeah, there are a couple of things. First of all, Syria's chemical weapons program is pretty well documented. So there, and it wasn't degraded in the way that Saddam Hussein's was. So I think that the parallels to there actually being chemical weapons can be dismissed. As for whether what was claimed earlier is that the chemical weapon in question was sarin gas, which is so dangerous that the components are kept separate, so that there's no chance of it being a leak. To use them, you actually then have to mix the components and load them into the weapons. And so what was being claimed is that there was credible evidence that that the Syrian regime had actually begun mixing small quantities and loading them onto weapons. There are two possibilities. One, it's
always citing unnamed sources.
Well, the thing is that this is the kind of information that you can't know from satellites, you can't know from drones. You can only know it from either people on the inside who are working with you or else intercepts. If it's true, again, I hesitate to use the word, but it's almost encouraging because it means we have a high degree of visibility into what the regime is doing. And whether
you do see the glass half full.
I see the glass half full tonight. The question is it true? Do they really have the information, or was it made up? That no one can know.
No one can know. And you were saying things are moving inside of Syria. They're also moving abroad. What's clear is that the superpowers are talking, with Russia's foreign minister invited to that NATO meeting in Brussels, even though he didn't get his way on those Patriot missiles, which NATO insists are purely there to act as a deterrent.
Actually, I do believe that a deployment of Patriot missiles will serve as an effective deterrent, and that way de-escalate the situation along the Syrian-Turkish border.
We were saying the stockpiling of armaments is always creating a risk that these armaments will be used. There you are. We have purely political concerns that Syria is increasingly militarized.
Kind of a strange week, Craig Kopitis, because on the one hand, he's in Moscow. We see the Russian president himself distancing himself from the regime in rhetoric, but at the same time, still flexing his muscle.
And the UN, going back to this using chemical weapons, saying, oh, we can't have this. Well, send me to a re-education camp, please, Francois. But I am really hard-pressed to see the difference between slaughtering people with cluster bombs and sarin gas. Now the politicians are trying to outrage the world by the type of weapon the Syrians are slaughtering their people with, not the means. And I just don't get it. They're slaughtering people.
Murder,
torturing,
raping, etc.
No, after 18 months, I failed to see, but I'm willing to go to the re-education camp.
I hear your point.
But how do you fight back against chemical weapons
But the fact is, too, that there are international conventions against chemical weapons. It's been a century where chemical weapons are considered beyond the pale.
There are international conventions against genocide. That's what's been going on there.
No, not genocide. Maybe crimes against humanity.
My definition of genocide is what's going on in Syria. But then again, I might have to go to the political re-education camp.
And we really have to go because we have to take a quick break, but we will be back. Stay with us. It's The World This Week. When we come back, we're going to look at the U.S. Secretary of State's busy week.